if you do equally well on a reality show of comedy, if the journalists get a chance to interview one male comedian or one female comedian, the journalists will definitely go to the female comedian.
Honestly, I was in China for like 6 days and it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. I had so much fun. It's not just about the show. Like it's just so cool to get to go somewhere and make new friends. And yeah, it was awesome.
That's
Um,
amazing. I think it's just great. Like I got super nervous the first time I performed outside of China. It was in US. It was actually in Burning Man. Like
you
I
went
was
to Burning
there.
Man?
My only Burning Man experience. I went there by myself. Didn't tell anyone, not even my parents or my friends, because I was going through a harsh breakup, and then I was like, I wanted to go there, but I also wanted to contribute. And back then, my only specialty is that I can do stand up, although I was super new. But then a camp just like kindly hosted me, and they were like, "Oh, because you're a Chinese comedian, we've never seen you guys exist before. So if you can do some shows, then we can, in return, give you some place to live and stuff and that." So then I performed there, and I was super nervous because this was my first time. And I feel like Burning Man people have a different expectation. Like they want something to be fun, high energy. I'm not super high energy person. So I have to take literally 7 tequila shots before I actually start my show.
That's
I was just
awesome.
like, I was like, I need to match the tension, high tension with the audience. And it's also like Burning Man is such a different crowd as people from all over the world. I was just very nervous. I was also thinking about, should I use a fake name so then people don't say, "Oh, Nora sucks." They were just like, "Oh, Candy sucks," or whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, just performing in other countries, I can't believe how you did that, because I mean, headlining is having even more pressure, right? Because people are here for you. I was just there, just do some shows, make people laugh, and that was it.
I'm like so impressed that you went to Burning Man by yourself and did stand-up comedy. Did you know I have a like a long stand-up bit about Burning Man. Have you ever seen it? I'll send it to
I
you.
think
But yeah.
I think I've seen it. It was a story like
Yeah,
part,
I've been
right?
to Burning
Yeah.
Man like 4 times. I've definitely done stand-up there.
Was that a bit you said about Plan B stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen it. I've seen
Yeah,
it.
it is. I mean, Burning Man is a really different context than like really anything else. And people are also like really on a lot of drugs there usually, so it kind of changes the vibe when everyone's like on LSD and stuff. But I have so much stuff I want to ask you. What other places have you ever done stand up besides China and Burning
um,
Man?
it was Burning Man. I also applied for a lot of like contests or comedy festival in US, like perform in Austin. I performed in San Diego. I also performed in San Francisco comedy competition.
Oh, nice.
And
I
a
did
bit
that
of
one too.
yeah, I tried my best. Like it was so much fun. I have so many following questions regarding on that to you. And I also performed in New York. That's about in US. I also performed in Thailand and Japan in English as well.
That
Yeah,
is so
and also
cool.
Hong Kong and Taiwan district. So yeah, that's everything.
That's amazing, Nora. Wow, you've done stand up so many places. Like how long have you been doing it at this point?
I think it's 17, 18, 19, 5 years, 5 more years.
Okay, so when I met you,
Yeah.
you had recently started stand up. I just met
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my year two, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
like
I was like super flattered. I was like, can I open for her? And then I'm so glad I have just 15 minutes that it's like doable. Like people think it's okay, funny. Otherwise, I'll be like, I cannot do that. Like Kate is too funny to have me opening for her. But it was a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for having me.
oh no, I thought it was awesome. You did amazing. Like I can't believe that you were so new to comedy. I never would have guessed that at all. Like I thought that you were I mean, I remember you saying at some point that you had started pretty recently, but other than that, I never would have known. Like I like want to go back and like do those shows again right now. It was so fun. Yeah.
Please, please,
I
please.
are they still doing stand up shows in English there and like are those shows still going?
So a lot of things happened between last time you were here and now. I
I
think that
heard. Yeah, there was a
yeah, so
pandemic.
some of the clubs they're not there anymore, and some of the venues or the bars they're shut down. I think like the pandemic got a really big hit on the the live performance experience industry in China, and also the live consumption industry in China. So we're still doing shows, but then I think so there are a couple of like big difference, right? Number one is when the pandemic was hitting the industry, we have requirement on the capacity rate. For example, like if we can open for shows, but it could only be up to 50% of capacity or 70% of capacity based on the situation. And also everybody has to wear a mask, like no drinking consumption is allowed, etc., etc. And also when we're doing shows, I don't think this is imaginable in US, but because we wanted to separate people, separate audience to lower down the possibilities of virus
Yeah.
influencing people, so then we have to seat audience like one skip one seat and then one person. So if
Yeah.
you are here as a couple, you have to hold your fiance's hand because there's an empty seat in between you guys because of the rules when you're performing at that period of time. So like people are just complaining about that, and then so we kind of change it to like two seats, skipping two seats, then two seats, etc. And then also because of the recent outbreak of the virus, like when we started to do shows in December, what happened was that so many people are getting COVID each single day. So every day we got like tons of calls saying that I need to get a refund. I just got tested positive. I need a refund now, and cough cough. And then we just like phasing it from went from like the full house to down to only maybe 50% of people are able or healthy enough to come to shows. So comedians are really struggling. We're just hanging out there, and then we're still doing the shows, but I think the industry is really, really different now.
I mean, I remember you telling me that like stand-up comedy is very new in China. How long would you say that like stand-up comedy has been a thing that people have like liked or gone to?
Yeah, I think that it's been here for a while. I think I remember people saying that there's stand-up comedy starting from maybe 2010 or even a bit earlier. Started by actually bit of like expat comedians. They're starting, different clubs in all over China. I think mostly Shenzhen and Shanghai, and maybe a bit of Beijing. But it was like very small audience, and then it was very like underground form of art. Like people don't know about it. It wasn't broadcasted everywhere. And then not until I think 2016, there are some TV shows focusing on stand-up comedy, sort of
Chinese
like
TV shows or
Chinese TV shows that sort of like late night show. Like they do stand up in front of a podium, and then it was like topic-ted stand-up comedy. And then people started to be aware of such form of art. And then I think in 2019 or 2018, there are more TV shows, like more reality shows that really brings up some big like comedy stars. Like a lot of people will follow them, and then people are just like crazy to see their shows, and then it just helps the industry overall to grow. And ever since then, it's becoming a booming industry. Yeah.
that's awesome. Like 2010, I know you said it's been around for a while, but like that's so recent. Like,
Yeah.
it's still really new.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like in the US, it's, like comedy is still pretty heavily men. Like it's probably still 70% men, but there's a lot of women doing comedy. It's like pretty normal. I would actually say
Mm.
it's very normal. And that's really shifted, I think, throughout like the past sort of 15 years. But now, if I were just to name like my 10 favorite comedians, probably seven of them would be women. Like, but from what I understand from talking to you and from talking to Rachel, it's not that common for women to do stand up in China still, yeah?
I think the ratio will be is rising. So that was also a question that I wanted to ask you. Like, what's the trend like for men and women like comedians ratio in US? Because I think the trend of female comedians rising pretty fast in the past 2 3 years. I think the reason being that we started to have some like icon like comedians, and also I think feminism, the trend or like the thought wave is really hitting the culture in China. So the fun fact is that like if you do equally well on a reality show of comedy, if the journalists get a chance to interview one male comedian or one female comedian, the journalist will definitely go to the female comedian because there's more interesting points about her. There's more questions to ask. There's more like social norms behind it that he can analyze or he or she can analyze. So I think female comedians in China, we are receiving a lot of attention, although the industry is still very male dominating, but I think that we're getting a lot of attention, so we are able to speak our things or speak our stories, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think that we kind of had that going on in the US, like probably around like 2012, 2013, sort of right when I started comedy. Amy Schumer was really famous, and I think there was this kind of like wave of like all the industry was just like looking for women, and all of a sudden it felt like a pretty great time to be
Mm,
like a woman in comedy. And I think that what you're saying like would also kind of hold true here, that if it's like all things equal, like probably, like a journalist would take the opportunity to interview a woman or a queer person or whatever. I think that like the sexism shows up more like in sort of like smaller or different ways, right? Like I think when people are going to buy tickets to a comedy club, like I have definitely heard people like directly say to me like, oh, I would love to bring my husband here tonight, but like he would never go see a female comedian, and like I think that some of the old school bookers, like these guys that have been booking comedy clubs for like 40, 50 years or whatever, like you still don't really see like in terms of like who's like headlining, it's still way less women,
mm,
in terms of like, not just stand up, but like the comedy industry, like who gets like writing jobs and stuff. Oh, this is probably like a sort of a different point. So like in the United States, to make a living doing comedy, most people find that they have to do something else too. And so most people
mm,
try to get into like acting or TV writing or whatever. Like I think like in the 90s and stuff, like it was possible to just like make money from like being a stand-up comedian, but the pay is so low for like stand up that like most people really try to do stand up. And
mm.
I do writing, for example. Like I've done some TV writing, I wrote a book, and like for me that's kind of like the thing that I do besides stand up. And stand up helps with that, it helps with stand up or whatever. But oh man, where was I going with this?
No, no, no. That's very interesting to me. Literally, because I could ask like 1,000 questions out of that. For example, like I wonder, you're saying that like female comedians they were very popular, like 2012, 2013. Then at what time did they become not that popular, extremely popular anymore? Like everybody becomes, oh yeah, there's a female comedian. So what?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's not like people stopped booking female comedians, It's like, um,
They just don't put extra attention on them anymore.
I think it became like sort of cliche in a way to like if I
Uh,
do an interview like in the US, like usually people won't ask me anymore like what's it like to be like a woman in comedy. Like that to me,
uh,
if somebody
I
who is
see.
like in the US like ask me, I'm not saying you, but like yeah, and people someone in the US ask me that, my reaction is like get over it. Like it's been years.
Um,
Like women do comedy, I think
okay.
it's like people are just kind of like have accepted it now because
Mm,
there are so many comedians. I think we got like,
mm,
I think there was a wave of attention on, women in comedy like during peak Me Too and stuff,
mm-hmm.
partially because like, several male comedians were outed as doing some pretty bad stuff. So,
Yeah.
I am, but I think now in the US, like the way that people are talking about feminism is more complex than just like men versus women. Like that's sort of old school feminism. Now, I think people are really looking at things through like, a broader perspective, like even gender. Like there's a lot of non-binary comedians, there are
Mm,
a lot of trans comedians. Like the US is like a very multiracial country. Like, people are just excited about like so many different perspectives and not
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, hey, like here's another white woman or something like that. Like it's,
Mm,
it's just kind of, I think that there's, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's like a broader effort to make comedy not just the old school white dudes, but
mm,
straight white guys. But that involves like so many people that are not just me talking about
yeah,
my stuff or whatever, Yeah.
yeah. I think it's funny to observe that we are actually experiencing on that trend still, that like we will still put a lot of effort on female comedians, because I don't think there were a lot of roles in China before that um, can empower women to be having the power of speaking, like the power of like voice. For example, like we spend a lot of time focusing on, like female nurses, they do a lot of contribution, or female teachers, etc., etc. But those people are considered to be more of a quiet person. Like they don't talk that much. But then female comedians, like they are so talkative. They have so many things to express and so many things to represent for. And that's why I think people are still excited about that. A lot of feminism people, or like people in general, they're still quite excited about that idea. And another thing I observe and notice is very interesting is that I think in US or in a lot of Western countries, comedians, they will talk more about how different they are as an individual, or as an self identification. But then that's not the case here, because we don't have that many different categorizations. For example, like we're still more many talking about men and women. We don't have a lot of discussion on the non-binary gender stuff. And also, like I think people here are generally just more, they appreciate, or they think it's more classy if you can talk about things, for example, like the social views, or if you can be more sarcastic about what's going on with you. Like what I feel is funny that's going on in Chinese comedy theme is that now people take funny as second priority. Top priority is that you have to teach people or enlighten people something. That's what
That
I
kind of
actually
happens in the US for a while. I think we're getting over
really.
that, but that was
Oh,
like,
I wish we could go over it, because I think that's more like a TED talk. Like I don't really like that.
I mean, I think when Donald Trump got elected, comedy was like really like that for a second, where people
Oh,
were like, we have to like change the country through stand-up
mm.
comedy. And then I think people calmed down. Not that people think that, like, in my opinion, this is me, Trump is pretty bad, but it was just like comedy is not how we're gonna get that guy out of office.
Mm,
Like we had to do a lot
mm,
of other things too
mm,
to get Trump out of office. So I think there's like a lot of sort of different kinds of comedy in the US. Like there is like very personal comedy, but then there are also are comedians who really are focused on like social stuff. I kind of probably do like a mix of both. But like one thing I really wanted to ask you is like when you're talking about like feminism and expressing feminist viewpoints on stage, what does that mean to you? Like what kinds of things are you thinking about there? Because I feel like I have probably such a different context for like what feminism means to me and the people around me.
mm. So what I think, it's only like my personal understanding of talking about feminism on stage, is simply telling my own story as a female living in China, and a lot of the pressure that I face, and how I view the world through my lenses. And that's part number one. And number two will be how I observe, like when it comes to man and female, like how that would be different in, for example, career, in family, like what that kind of brings me to thinking, and etc. etc. Oh, how that's ridiculous to me. And so that's feminism to me. How about to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when you said that, except for in China, I did relate to a lot of it. I don't know what it's, I don't know what it's like to live in China, but I mean, I do think that like for me, you know how I like thought about this when I sort of first started. I think like with women, we're often sort of seen as being like sort of like the side character in the world, like just like the guy is the protagonist. And
Mm,
I like to write jokes about situations where like a woman isn't normally like the protagonist of that story. That bit we were talking about, like being at Burning Man and having like
Mm,
a pregnancy scare, like a broken condom, and just like having to sort of like deal with that stuff. Like when
mm,
that is, it wasn't a completely true story. Mostly it was though.
mm,
Like, I mean, there was like bits that I made more funny, but like the general thing happened. And like
mm-hmm,
when that was like happening for real
mm-hmm.
in real life, I felt like, oh, this is like a thing that is happening to me. Like this is like a
Yeah.
experience that like I, did something wrong as a woman to have this event. And I kind of was like sort of when making comedy out of that, what would it be like if I am like the hero of this story? Not like
Mm-hmm.
a literal hero, but just you know what I mean? Like I guess like
Yeah.
valuing your own perspective like on experiences that like you're supposed to be like ashamed of or something.